Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Marshall, and I oversee the Visual Arts Exhibitions program at the Hoover Public Library in Hoover, Alabama. And today I am so thrilled to introduce to you artist and educator Douglas Degges. Douglas is from Shreveport, Louisiana, and is currently based in Mansfield, Connecticut, where he is an assistant professor of art in painting and drawing at the University of Connecticut. Douglas received his MFA from the University of Iowa and a BA in studio art from Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. His exhibition Squirrel from Memory is on view now at the library and up through September 6th. So Douglas, hello, and thank you so much for doing the exhibition and doing this talk today.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's an unusual and ideal opportunity to share work with folks that know the particular aspects of the landscape that I'm interested in, having grown up in North Louisiana. So let me figure out how to, here we go. Okay. So the title of the talk is the same as the show and the same as the project. Squirrel from Memory is about being in two places at once, or at least trying to be. So I live in very rural Connecticut in what's called the Quiet Corner. I think initially pejoratively, and now this sort of zone owns that identity. So I'm in the woods here, and it feels remarkably like the woods that I know in northern Louisiana. And I've lived mostly away from the Southeast since college. I went to college in Memphis, but since my early 20s, haven't spent much time there. And so this project, A Squirrel from Memory, on view at the Hoover Public Library, is a sampling of paintings that are about reconnecting with the Southeastern United States and with my family, and woods and landscapes that I know near Shreveport, Louisiana. So I mentioned the project's about trying to be in two places at once. It's also about just thinking on the number of ways that we can conceive of home. And the project for me sort of focused on an understanding of home that is sort of in the body or embodied, and not about a particular geography or specific location. It's more about a network of people and relationships that are present or active, and then thinking about land and landscape as well, that was formative for me during my childhood. So I thought I would start with discussing the process that I make use of to make this work. I think that's a nice, maybe concrete introduction to the work. So A Squirrel from Memory consists of drawings that are mostly made on paper using graphite drawing pencils and erasers and blending stumps like smudging tools. And then I make paintings primarily with acrylic paint, but I use water-based oils some and water-based enamel. And the drawings look fairly photographic, and then the paintings look kind of antithetical to that. It's like very provisional, fast-paced, and highly abstract. So that's maybe a quick visual description of the work, but my process is that I work exclusively with images that come to me in a family group text. My mom, dad, and brother, in keeping me up to date on what they do, what they see, send me cell phone photos in this group chat. And so I've archived thousands of them at this point, and with their permission, I've been mining them, exploring them in my studio practice, in these paintings and drawings that I've mentioned. So one of the things that was initially exciting to me is that these are images of things that feel really pertinent and close to me, but also images of things that I don't see out in the art world. And so I got excited about that, and then also thinking about what does it mean to share experiences through a phone? How does one share experiences digitally? And so I'm not physically there for the things that are being captured by my mom and dad. It's mostly my mom taking the photographs. Like how do I have access to those experiences that are being shared with me? And painting and drawing seem like really good vehicles to slow down, to reflect on, you know, on an experience I wasn't present for in such a way where it sort of partially becomes my own. So the screen captures in the previous slide are all just, you know, a snippet of the group text. So stepping back from discussing A Scroll from Memory for a moment, I thought I would just talk about it, my general approach in the studio, and this will make sense why I'm mentioning it later in the talk. This is a sampling of rounding up 10 projects that I've been working on over the past, I think the oldest work here is maybe 2013 or 14. So over the past decade, these are 10 solo studio projects that I've been engaged in. And I love working in projects, discrete projects, because I can kind of bracket my thinking and articulate specific parameters and questions that I want to engage with. And it allows me to sort of bounce around and that not be a chaotic experience for myself. Working this way has led me to think about something that my students talk about all the time, and that's this idea of style, or having a voice, or signature style, I guess, is a term that I've heard used a good bit. And one of the things that working across all these projects has opened up for me is reflecting on how style can be something that's treated conceptually, that it can be a space of ideas. And so in bouncing across these projects, I've wondered what's at the core, what's at the center of the work. And I think in some respects, again, these are broad strokes, stepping back, looking at the larger studio practice, the center is not just one thing. And I know all of us that make art will relate to that, right? The work is never just about one thing. That sounds terribly boring if that were to be the case. So I've been thinking about style as a wholesome pursuit of finding one's own voice or footing, but also a questionable pursuit of visual consistency and something that could feel like branding in a highly commercial or capitalistic sense. So style for me operates as a conceptual space where I can ask questions rooted in conversation with my love of painting and painting history. So some things I'm thinking about are why possess style? What does that look like? What does that do for the work and a creative practice that aspires to be open and unfolding and free? So back to this specific project, it is an attempt at bringing that sensibility, that distribution of attention across 10 different projects into one space. So A Scroll from Memory, as I've previously mentioned, is comprised of these graphite drawings and these mostly water-based painted larger acrylic paintings. And here's a good sampling of that. So the work on the left is a very tiny graphite drawing on paper of armadillo hide closely cropped. And then the painting on the right is that same image, even more closely cropped with some confetti on it. So I thought I would read a snippet of a longer statement just to make sure I give a good foundational understanding of, you know, what we're going to look at over the next 20 or so slides. The smaller works on paper are more literal and time-intensive translations of printed photographic images, mostly of northern Louisiana landscape, fish, small game, and rodents. These photographic images are digitally prepared, occasionally collaged, and present a far more resolved or articulated visual language than the paintings. The drawings are my way of studying an image, internalizing it, putting it to memory, if you will. And the paintings are crafted either from memory with whatever is held onto from that initial drawing process, or they're approached in a fast-paced and painterly way. So these are good works to kind of bookend the imagery we're going to look at now. So occasionally a painting gets made from imagery that's sourced by me and locally. This is an oddball painting on the left that I made a year and a half after moving to Connecticut, but generally speaking, everything else is from Doyline, Louisiana. So if you've been to the show, thank you. The work in the show is exclusively paintings. I've given up on the hard and fast rules that are about pitting these two different ways of making against one another. I frequently show just the drawings or just the paintings, but initially the idea, which I'll talk about more later, was to kind of put them in argument, in complementary argument or dissonance in an exhibition context. So one of the things that I've been totally fixated on for years now is just thinking about hard work and labor and technical skill in relation to art making or object making, I guess, even more generally. So I'm interested in how the drawing on the left says something about time, about labor, about technical skill, about traditional processes and art materials even. And then the painting on the left says something else about those things as well, but how? What's being said there? And I think what's being said there gets activated because it's, in this case, on the slide in conversation with this drawing of a cicada. So is the collision or contrast? It's the collision or contrast that I'm compelled by. I like thinking about how to visualize an argument or cognitive dissonance in a studio practice. So one way that I've previously thought about showing this work when I get to present it in a solo exhibition fashion is to think about how to visualize a nonverbal argument using inanimate objects, right? Paintings and drawings. So back to the dissonance or the high contrast between the two different ways of making work. I'm enjoying how the paintings undo the drawings, undo maybe the relationship to convention and tradition to some degree. And I'm also thinking about how these two different modes of making work might posit the work, like the center of the work, the center of this particular project as being somewhere between the drawings and the paintings. So when they're shown together, I like to imagine that people that take interest in the work and, spend a little bit of time with it can level or average the two different sensibilities and create in their mind's eye something that, that literally might exist in the center. So again, a kind of averaging or leveling. So another way to speak to the same kind of ideas, I'm thinking a lot about how the self is multiple selves and how we're often of multiple minds almost simultaneously, back to the cognitive dissonance and wanting that to be held in the studio practice. So the drawings, I'm hopeful that they hold on to kind of familiar and traditional expectations of hand-drawn or painted art objects. Is it well crafted? Was it labored over? Did it take a long time to make? Was it hard to make? Is it a convincing representation of something recognizable? And the hope here is that the drawings kind of reverently engage with some of those questions. And I've already mentioned using painting and drawing as a space to slow down, savor experience, reflect on experience for this project experience that is and isn't my own. That just exists on a device and then is pulled into the paintings and drawings in my studio. So I guess to say more succinctly, the thing that's at the core of the paintings being made after the drawings are made is that I've been for years now reflecting on why it is that we generally fetishize skilled labor and hard work in artworks. I think it's totally fascinating, and I'm always wondering why many people want to look at something that is difficult to make that maybe they couldn't make. And I think specifically painting is a great vehicle for reflecting on questions like that, because it's got such a long history and tradition of objects made that exhibit extreme technical skill and years of study and material exploration and knowledge. So the flip side of what I've been sharing is that I'm also preoccupied with a different kind of question, and that's how can I do something poorly but well? And that's hard to describe what I mean exactly by that, but I think that the paintings are an attempt to embody that sensibility. how do I make something fast and maybe even provisional or casual, and it read like there is enough there to hold someone's attention. So again, how to do something poorly but well. What does that look like, and how do I know it when I see? Will I know it when I see it? So I haven't really been talking about the works on the slides, but generally speaking, we're looking at a graphite drawing paired with a painting that was made roughly around the same time. One thing that I'm interested in moving away from conversations about skill and labor is image-object relationships in painting. Painting often gets talked about as being mostly, even exclusively, an image-based practice. And I have been thinking a lot about how to set the bones of the painting, the sculptural qualities of the painting at odds with the top layer of paint, the part of the painting that reads like an image that you could flatten and hold in your mind. So thinking about how to set the object qualities against the image qualities in the painting. And a very smart painter named Gary Stephan has talked a little bit about in a number of his lectures how the more you tend to an object, the less you tend to an image. The more you tend to an image, the less you tend to an object. And I think painting is pretty great at sort of holding that image object tension. And I'm looking to have the work often land awkwardly in the center. So here's another drawing and painting pairing. Sometimes I bring in some new materials briefly. So this one's got the standard acrylic paint, just traditional heavy body acrylic paint, and some spray paint happening in it. And then it's a close crop of a jackfish, which isn't a desirable or edible to most people fish. And it's being held in my dad's hand, and it's closely cropped. That's the fish eye with the blade of grass stuck in it. And then the painting on the right's an abstraction of fishing tackle, like fishing line, and one specific lure attached to the line. So one of the things that I talk to my students about, and I think about all the time for myself, is that the studio environment, whether it's the classroom or in my case, the space I make paintings in, I think about it as a site of perpetual learning. So I love learning new materials, and I frequently find myself bumping into the edges of my own facility and familiarity with a particular tool, material, or process. And I find that imbues some of the work with a degree of awkwardness, and I like letting that happen. I like letting the work not be about an attempt at perfection, or have the paintings drop off any concern for show personship. So I like to make some decisions that let me bounce around with different materials and do so more fully, more freely. And that's, I work at a small scale. I usually work on panel or canvas mounted to panel. I work on the same kind of paper over and over. And I think that having some material restrictions or parameters predetermined creates more opportunity and freedom elsewhere in the studio for me. So there's a tree that's out in front of my parents' place on Lake Bistineau near Doylean, Louisiana, that has a bunch of yo-yos on it. Yo-yos look like the toy, but are a fishing device. They're spring loaded and pull fish out of the water. And this is an abstraction of a tree with yo-yos holding catfish. And then the drawing on the right is a close crop of the inside of a bass mouth, a fish mouth. And I'm going to speed up a little bit here and just show a bunch of work. So a drawing of a flower, a painting of that same flower. Spiderwort's the name of the flower, and it's also known, another name for it is cow slobber, which I thought was kind of fun and funny. So with a lot of the paintings, like the one in the previous slide and the one in this one, I'm often thinking about I'm thinking about emergence. When does an image appear? And related to that, I'm thinking about when is there something there? When is there a there there? It sounds like a riddle, but what I mean there is just simply, how does material slip into being spatial or illusionistic or an image of any kind for that matter? So I started with a drawing and a painting of an armadillo, and this same image has been pulled across a bunch of paintings, and this is something I do frequently. An image lands successfully in a painting, and then I usually iterate on that one first work, and here's some that are related to that first painting. And then here are two more. So a lot of the work I've been sharing with you all is from 2020 and 2021. So we're moving now into more recent works that are from last fall to more or less May of this year. So painting of an armadillo tail on the left, and then a drawing of an armadillo tail, and then a painting of 3 turtle shells nested against one another. So common animals that show up in the paintings are fish, of course, of a variety of different kinds: perch, bass, gar, jackfish, and then grasshoppers and snakes and turtles. Here's a painting of shed snake skin on the right, and then a drawing of alligator gar teeth on the left. So more recently, these are the 2 most recent works that I'm going to share. More recently, I've been pushing the drawing into the painting, but using a collage process, or at least a collage aesthetic. So that the areas that are grayscale in more or less the center of both of these works are stenciled out areas where I'm applying a specific kind of ground. It's called absorbent ground, and I layer it and I buff it smooth, and then I draw on it much like I would the sheets of paper that we've looked at previously. So here, thinking about that kind of tension or distance between the 2 different sensibilities existing within the same object. And then I thought, because in many ways, all of this work is about authorship and collaboration, and, how do you work with other people in a studio practice that I think conventionally is a solo activity? How do you open it up to the world and to other people? I've been making these sculptures that I'm taking this opportunity to share with you all, where my partner and I have more recently adopted a puppy, and I have been thinking about how we live with non-humans and how we can do that creatively. And so my dog is just over 1 now, and he's an aggressive chewer, and so moves through toys really quickly. And so I've started to think about how those toys are inherently aesthetically interesting, and then even more so after they're activated or destroyed by him. And so just another way to think about authorship and collaboration. Something new that's showing up for me here in the work that I hope to bring to the paintings and drawings is this like the way that aesthetic projection happens. I'm working with this dog, and my assumption is that all of the ways that he is making decisions are tactile. It's all about the body and the chewing experience. And for me, it's all visual. And so he destroys these things, and I think they're fascinating looking. And he's inadvertently become my studio assistant. So we've been looking at a number of wool felt or rope toys that are deconstructed by my dog. So similar to a scroll from memory, I'm thinking about, again, collaboration and authorship. The dog's involvement is very passive. How aware is he of this? I mean, not at all. He's just aware that he's getting spoiled. And my job here, the sort of parameters I've stumbled into for this project, are just to bring things together. So to give them structure, to adhere them to one another, or to put them in a container or give them hardware. It's almost exclusively structural, and by extension, I guess, compositional. So like the other work where I'm extending my parents' experience and the digital photographs into painting and drawing, I'm here thinking about throwaway culture and how much waste is produced by my dog chewing up these toys. So thinking about how to extend the life of these objects. And then I'm also, again, thinking about work and labor. So my dog doesn't know anything about bills or taxes or jobs. And this is kind of a joke, of course, but I like thinking about putting my dog to work while also spoiling him. And if he's working on a toy, then I'm working in the studio. I like that notion too of how we conceptualize work in a creative context. So these works are not in the show at HPL, but if you were interested in seeing more of them, of course you could look at my website. But this is a sort of natural extension of the work that I've been doing, and that's up in the gallery. And thanks for your time. That's the end of my slides.
Thank you, Douglas. That was really great. I have a couple questions for you. So as an artist working in the parameters and the history of abstraction, why is this zone of painting where you have chosen to exist? Like, why is abstraction profoundly impactful for you as an artist and as a viewer?
That's a great question. So I think about this a lot in the classroom with my students. Many of them are perfection-minded and want to have a clear idea in the world of image making, a specific image that then they execute. Then material is moved, and that thing that exists in perfection in the mind is made. So I end up talking to them a lot about abstraction as a vehicle to open up the process to other ways of thinking. And what I love about abstraction, especially process-based abstraction, where the material gets a voice in the work, I like how you have to listen to it. You have to be present through the building of the work and responsive to it. Meaning the work itself evolves and surprises you. And I like that space of not knowing exactly where things are gonna end up. I also love abstract painting because I often don't know what I'm looking at, and I treat that as an invitation to speculate, to meaning make with the work, and not just passively receive whatever the imagery, might be otherwise outside of an abstract context. And I've sort of found my way into these paintings that are quasi-abstract. I mean, they all have photographic sources, but historically, the work was even more abstract.
Kind of jumping off from that question, listening to you speak, I get curious about this idea that you talked about the making work that kind of rejects the idea of skill and wanting to make work that is bad in a great way, bad in a good way, so talk a little bit more about how you're exploring that as an artist, why that excites you, where that comes from in your studies, and if you think that it's something that you'll continue, does it continually excite you?
Yeah, that's a hard question. So I love learning new things, and on some level that desire to or that willingness that I have for having the work, it's hard to describe. So to have the work exist, unconventionally resolved or slightly awkward or a little bit messy or even a little bit ugly is showing up in the work because of the learning new tools and materials. and not waiting to make work until I've mastered those tools and materials and processes. Just like going to work immediately and letting my learning be content in the work is of interest to me, but also just thinking about aesthetics in ways that aren't just about formal astuteness or beauty is interesting to me. I think Amy Silman has been a major influence on me in that regard. She has a great article called "On Awkwardness, Shit Happens," if this sounds of interest to anybody listening to this. And she just talks about what else can show up in painting. And she mentions messiness and ugliness, and I'm interested in that as well. And one way I found my way into it is just I learned a new thing, and it's immediately brought into the studio. I also like to think about it in relation to humility, or a history of showpersonship, or a desire for mastery. And for me, the space of aesthetics can be conceptual or philosophical or ideological, however you want to frame it. And I think that's why that's at least intellectually for me there.
In past talks, you mentioned, the idea of like making small works and how that is a radical act, and making work for friends too. And I think those two ideas are connected to the process of, rejecting painterly norms, or this idea of making good paintings.
Yeah, I worked for a brief period of time, about a year, for Thomas Noskowski, and he talked a lot about making paintings for his friends and on standardized formats and using cheap surfaces. And in the context of I don't know, heroic abstract painting, that was a political and obviously conceptual gesture too. And I think I lifted that from him. I want to be making work that people I love and I care about and am close to can live with it, in whatever space they call home. And then I also like gifting or bartering or trading work as well. And that's, I guess, an extension of maybe thinking about where some paintings go, and that's in big museums or in big institutions. And again, I'm wanting to circulate work more locally. Sort of getting away from your question, sorry, Jennifer, but
No, that you're still in line with it. I mean, I think that also is part of it too. It's like work that you can mail, is incredibly important. It's a rejection of the grandiose format of painting and the history of that.
For sure.
So one more question for you. So I'm interested in the act or process of recording one's own space, or recording the act of being in a space, and perhaps as a statement of minimal existence. So as an artist, we select our subject matter, right? Like, we choose what external productions we create. So why are you drawn to the process of painting that is a quiet reflection on your own environment, rather than grandiose visual fabrications?
That's a hard one. So I think one part of my answer is simply practical. I like making a lot of work, and I'm thinking about how much waste I produce. And I'm also thinking about, when the work doesn't go somewhere, I have to live with it, and I'm always having a storage problem. And so there's a practical dimension there. And then you also mentioned the shipping. I like being able to have a sustainable practice. And I think, unfortunately, for many of us, that becomes a consideration of how the work moves around in the world, and what's the economic impact of that. I suppose another incidental impact is environmental. There is something about the scale of the work that supports what you said, minimal existence. If I'm going to make objects, I want to try to be more responsible with them. And yeah, so those are some aspects of it. And I think too, because I like looking at paintings and drawings in groupings, shifting the scale of the work down is another, I guess, practical consideration, so that you can back up from an installation of the work and take in multiple at once. There's this really great interview between R.H. Quaitman and Amy Silman in Bomb magazine, where R.H. Quaitman talks about some of her paintings existing as props for other works. And I've sort of adopted that notion for myself as a way to, require work to be seen in a kind of network. And that some roles are supportive, and some paintings can be can only exist in conversation with other works. I just love that as an upending of a more conventional and Western notion of painting being about building a world that is maybe closed off at the edges of the object. And so opening up again that notion to many objects in space is of interest to me as well. So hence the work has ended up being pretty small.
Well, let's wrap. I think this has been so wonderful to hear you speak about your work and to get to have the paintings in my space and exist with them and stare at them every day. It's been such a gift. So thank you. Endless thank yous for doing this.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. This has been an amazing experience, and thanks for the super thoughtful questions on my work.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time.